So this week we had 4 articles to read and the 2 videos. And the article about the sociometer I found particularly interesting because it was about how people are not motivated to maintain their self-esteem per se, but rather that they seek to increase their relational value and their social acceptance. And this I found interesting because typically when you think of self-esteem, you think of something that is intrinsic, something that is internal. And here the article argues that it's not as internal and it's rather about increasing those feelings of social acceptance and, being socially desirable. So I found that quite interesting. And then they use this self-esteem to gauge their level of effectiveness. So it was an interesting concept and a way that I've not thought about self-esteem before. And it argues that people seek this high self-esteem because it helps them to attain these desirability goals of theirs by maintaining their confidence levels, and it also gives them motivation when they're going through difficult tasks. The second article about inclusion highlighted the leader-member exchange theory, or the LMX theory, and that focused on the quality of the interactions or exchanges between the leader and the follower. And this was interesting because it can be something as small as an interaction that can make all the difference in the world between a leader and a follower. And this can obviously positively or negatively impact inclusion. It also said that high quality exchanges are characterized by mutual respect and trust, while low quality interactions are characterized by a lack of mutual trust. So with this, supervisors in an organization can affect employee perceptions of inclusion through the quality of these types of interactions. The article about managing diversity states that social identity theory is when individuals classify themselves into social groups based on salient characteristics like age, race, and gender. And this is done to pursue a positive self-concept. So here the self-concept is the individual's perception of themselves, and that comes from the individual's knowledge about their group membership in their social group, and also the importance that they put onto that group membership. And then the final article about the cross-cultural industrial organizational psychology and organizational behavior went over the past 100 years of cross-cultural research. So the part that stood out to me the most about the article was how research is increasingly illustrating that we need to expand many of the existing constructs so that they can be relevant beyond the context of just the West. I think that research is often very westernized, and I think that it kind of, especially when you are talking about cross-cultural research, I think it's increasingly important to kind of go beyond that, to kind of get a full picture of what cross-cultural practices really look like, because it doesn't really help if you're only looking at the West. And then the videos, the one that I loved the most was Janet Stovall's TED Talk, where she highlighted her Project 87 that identified key issues, and then she provided some practical solutions for addressing those issues. And when I heard this, it made me think of policies back home in South Africa where they enacted laws to rectify the past racial disparities, particularly in businesses. So, for example, one of them were called Black Economic Empowerment. So it wasn't just about having numbers. It was about there were actual consequences. So, for example, the consequences were funding. Of course, this doesn't always play out the way that it's supposed to. But I guess it's a start. So yeah, and then she also mentioned an important distinction between diversity and inclusion, and she said that diversity is a numbers game while inclusion is more about the impact. And I feel like sometimes these terms are like merged into one another, and then when that happens, then accountability becomes blurred, and it doesn't really translate into real consequences like she was talking about. And I think a few of the examples that she gave was like losing a job or losing sales, and I think it's a very practical solution to these kinds of problems. And I think that by having this mindset, companies would actually be more accountable instead of just claiming that they are more accountable, or that they want to be. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. And then the second video about how diversity makes teams more innovative was about how Rocio Lorenzo and her team surveyed different companies to find out whether diversity really does make teams more innovative. And they found that this hypothesis was true. She also spoke about how companies like to say that they are not yet there, but they are not that bad. I found that pretty funny. And I think this happens a lot when companies try to meet certain numbers just to be able to say that they are diversified and that they are inclusive. But in reality, it doesn't translate to an actual inclusive environment or a diverse culture. And then the two decisions that she mentions at the end, who to hire and who to develop and promote, stood out to me, because I think that it's a very powerful tool that shows the impact of inclusion, and goes beyond just numbers for diversity. And I think that the first step for this is for companies to actually realize the importance of diversity and to see that it's not just in a number, but why it matters specifically for innovation. So I would say that one of the ways that my workplace fosters inclusion is definitely through the LMX theory. My boss, I think, did a very good job at identifying our unique talents, and of course, we did too, and our potential limitations. And once we were given tasks, we were, of course, evaluated, and we were either given another task of a similar nature or a different task to better meet our expertise. And then from that, she assigned us roles, and we were provided with clear expectations in our roles. And I think that this definitely was something that stood out to me, because I don't think I've experienced that before. And it made me feel good about myself, because I felt like my skills and my talents were, finally being recognized and appreciated. And then through this, I would say that my workplace has fostered an environment where we are free to express ourselves without the fear of retaliation. We really are given the psychological safety to show our true selves without rejection. For example, we have an open door policy with our boss. We are always encouraged to speak up when something is bothering us. And another thing we do is when we have cultural events, we share our proposals with one another, like on a Google Doc, and then everybody else is allowed to provide feedback. We're a very small team, so this kind of works for us. And the thing is, I obviously can't speak for the entirety of the organization, but this is definitely something that happens within our team. And I think that the nature of our work also requires us to have these different mindsets, because we are working with a very diverse population. So in our team, we all have very diverse backgrounds, and we use that to our advantage when we serve, for example, our international student population. And then since we have a diverse climate, our psychological safety needs are met. And then that makes it easiest to actually want to do the work, to want to perform better, and to make a difference, because we feel like our opinion matters. We feel like our voices are being heard. So we are able to use that knowledge from our different backgrounds and apply it to our work. And then to promote diversity, something that I found particularly cool was that we all speak a different language. And and sometimes we would teach each other how to speak these different languages. So each week we would pick a different person, and they would teach us some phrases, and then that week we would kind of just use those phrases. It's usually just something like a hello and a goodbye and a thank you, but like just the pleasantries. But I think it definitely opens up our minds, and it just kind of reminds us about that diversity. And then another thing we do is obviously like having events like for Black History Month. And we often have these events to celebrate diverse cultures and our diverse backgrounds. And we try and make sure that we really do our research so that it is, accurate and it is authentic. So, yeah, thank you.